Hi everyone, it's Amit here, and welcome to my review of the Oriolus Szalayi, which is a very interesting mid-fi IEM. Pardon my use of the term, but that's just to denote a price point of sub $1,000. So I do review and I do own a bunch of flagship stuff. So these are stuff in the kilowatt range and above. So $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, etc. However, this IEM here, which is less than $1,000, around $900 to be precise, has had more staying power in my stable than a lot of other flagships which have come and gone. And that's because I do think it punches literally very hard above its price point with regard to certain parameters that I really like, such as microdynamic contrast, which by which I mean a sense of punch and slam, lovely mid-range and so forth. But in this review, I do want to take you through its frequency response graph, its configuration, its ergonomics, build comfort, etc. And overall talk about why I've owned this for as long as I have and why I still haven't sold this, and why I think this is a very underrated IEM from Oriolus, which is a pretty well-known brand by now. Okay, to start with Oriolus Japan is a brand based out of Tokyo that I think is professionally managed by another firm, and these guys have turned out one hit after another. So the Isabel was a huge hit, the Oriolus Traillii was an even bigger hit, and even now, years after the Traillii came out. So the Traillii, which is affectionately called the Bird, which I've reviewed on this channel, and I'll link to this in the description of this particular video if you want to check out the review of the Oriolus Traillii, which comes in at $6,000 and is the most high-priced IEM perhaps on the planet right now. The interesting thing with the Traillii, in addition to being high-priced, is that the market would have figured out that if it did not perform at the level of its pricing, the market would have sussed it out by now. But years after it has come out, it's still going strong, and that is evident if you ever visit the Headfire water cooler thread, which is where I hang out online. As far as audio communities go, it's one of the best communities for portable audio. If you see the rankings that they do pretty frequently and update the rankings, and they're based on consumer preferences, people who frequent that group, and a huge number of people from all over the world frequent that group, you'll see that the Traillii still makes it to the top 5, top 10 of IEM ranking lists. So these guys know how to make IEMs. The Isabel, in some ways, was a mini Traillii. It was as laid back and as languid and melodic as a Traillii. This retains some of the best bits about the Isabel, but has its own character. So that's the TLDR, a long one, but I did want to make sure you wanted to watch the rest of it because it is a special IEM that is flying under the radar. And I'll try to offer my rationale as to why I think it's flying under the radar. But before I do all that, let's just get the basic stuff out of the way, like the configuration, the specifications, and all that. So this is a very interesting IEM in terms of its specifications. It is a tribrid, a hybrid with 3 types of drivers. It has one ballast armature for treble. It has a planar magnetic driver, a 14 mm planar driver for mid-range, and a 10 mm, which is a large enough size, one would hope, a driver for bass. So, and the 3D printed bodywork, this looks pretty nice. This is the faceplate. The shells are on a slightly bigger side, but this has never caused me discomfort. And I can't claim that this will not cause you discomfort, but most people who have tried this IEM with these tips or a bunch of other tips that I own, people who have come to my house and tried this IEM have not complained about comfort, guys. So there's something going on with how well they have designed this shell. And then they have an OFC cable, which is a very supple cable, the sort of cable you tend to get with Oriolus IEMs. It really has a different first times cable, PW audio. It's not a first times cable, I'm sorry. The Traillii does have a different PW audio cable, which is a slightly higher end cable, but this cable will do the work in a jiffy and then some. It is not easy to tangle. It is fairly easy to untangle. It is not something that has memory. It is supple. It is just wonderful. One of my friends says this reminds me of paracord type cables, but it is like you can see here. I untangled it in a jiffy. So it's a very good cable, guys. And the same friend says he would buy this cable if Oriolus sold his cable separately because he likes these thin, flexible cables. So it has a 4.4 termination, of course, and this has a recessed jack, which is great because these 2 pins then stay in. Tips to make a difference with the sound with most IEMs, some more than the others, and this does get a significant amount of treble boost. I'm sorry, with these Asla Sedna EarFit Max tips. These tips in general tend to bring out the treble, and that's the case here as well. Not to say this needs a huge lift in treble, but in general, it is a very warmish sound. And I'll talk about sound in a jiffy. And these tips, I feel like, are fantastic pairing with these IEMs. And I highly, highly, highly recommend these tips with these IEMs, guys. Okay. To talk about the frequency response, when I talk about tuning, this is what the frequency response looks like. A huge sub-bass shelf and glides down very smoothly all the way up to the 1 kilohertz range, and then it peaks up until about 1.5, 1.8 kilohertz, and then it's more or less flat all the way up to 6 kilohertz. There's a bit of a peak around 7 kilohertz, which is important to offset this whole lot of warmth that you're getting here. And then you don't have a whole lot of air frequencies, but you do get a bit of some energy here, so it does have just the right amount of air for a lot of you who are sensitive to air frequencies. Fear not, this is not going to be a painful experience in the treble at all. If anything, if you are a treble head, you might want to tweak with your source or cable or tips to bring out the best of this IEM. So this is what the frequency response chart looks like. Overall, a bassy affair. It's a thunderous bass. It's bass for days. It's sub-bass oriented as opposed to mid-bass oriented. But you do get, so you don't necessarily feel the lack of mid-bass, guys, but it does not sound thin by any means, which is wonderful. A lot of these sub-bass oriented IEMs sound very thin, but because of the enormity of the bass shield that I just showed you, it does have a sense of punch and slam, a sense of growl, so it's pretty balanced in the way sub-bass comes across, especially if you use these tips. So what these tips do, guys, is it does to some extent rein in the sub-bass, and it sort of, sheds a little more light on the treble. And it doesn't do that just by reining the sub-bass, because if you just rein in the bass, you'd automatically have or enjoy the effect of having a more elevated treble by contrast. But in this case, I think it does both. It is making the sub-bass slightly, ever so slightly less, and it's making the treble ever so slightly more. So these tips are fantastic again. Okay, so that's what the tonality is, but what does it translate to in real life listening experience? And this will segue into a discussion on technical performance as well. So I do drive this Szalayi with, both my Sony W1 ZM2 DAP, which I've talked about or raved about way too many times. This is the Sony, my favorite DAP, and this is the FIO BTR7, which is, I think, perhaps the best Bluetooth device available by way of a dongle with which to carry in your pocket if you were to go on a walk or what have you, or even use in the gym. So I do use the Szalayi in those conditions because of its impactful bass. I do like music that has rhythm, like metal, rock, etc. With it, and I do like listening to such kinds of music, such genres of music when I'm at the gym. So what that means is this becomes very handy then, this FIO BTR7. So I'm just switching it on here. The Bluetooth's connecting. Guys, this is a wonderful combination, as is this. But they sound very different, and I'll talk about the differences. This will give you a much larger sound stage. This, in general, is a source that I do think has the wonderful effect of enhancing sound stage for IEMs. This has a really wide sound stage, especially if you sort of use the filters that I do. Even in stock form, it's a wide sound stage, but just to take you through the filters that I use, I do. Now, let me just swipe this. Oh, it's not being swiped. It's not swipeable, by the way, if the DSD remastering is switched on. The remastering feature here is wonderful. It just makes the overall presentation a little more incisive if you want a little faster, tighter presentation. But what I do, I use the vinyl processor with the turntable mode on. I use the dynamic normalizer, usually switched on or off depending on my mood. And the DC phase linearizer makes a huge difference with the bass. I use the Type B standard, which is slightly more sub and mid bass balanced. In any case, using these filters or without, I get a wonderful soundstage. The filters definitely enhance the soundstage even more. Now, you might be asking, what about the soundstage of the BTR7? Even of the BTR7, I get a wonderful soundstage, guys. And the soundstage is typified when I play this particular track. Not Love Will Keep Us Alive. So this track I was playing, it's of course from Eagles. And this just is testimony to how well the Szalayi does vocals. So it's not a one-trick pony. It's not just a bass set IEM. It does do vocals really well, which is true to the Oriolus sort of signature. It has a lovely, very meaty, very warm, I dare say a wet rendition of vocals. Male vocals in particular sound wonderful, guys. And what I'll show you is Frogs of Alice in Chains, and Jerry Cantrell, obviously, and Lane Staley have a very different sort of a vocal presentation. It's a little more soulful in some ways, a little more, it's obviously grungy. And even these sorts of vocal inflections and variations in different vocal performances, when you go from the Eagles to when you go to Alice in Chains, is covered really well. Guns N' Roses was wonderful. Axl Rose sounds exactly like he's supposed to. And this track in particular sounds very wide, guys. You get a wonderful sense of stereo image separation. So you do get vocals, lead guitar on the right, and you get drums on the left. And the separation is just phenomenal. It starts out with this sort of the bass guitar plucks, which sound very lifelike, very heavy. So I like this a lot. This has a lot of note weight, the Szalayi does. And I also played a bunch of other rock songs, as you can see. So overall, it's just absolutely wonderful for both vocal-based tracks and rock tracks, and two sort of genres that I gravitate towards. And if you are wondering what female vocals sound like, female vocals sound fantastic on it. It sounds lush, it sounds crisp, it sounds just great. Now, the differences in these two sources in the way in which they portray the sound of the Szalayi is that this source, I do think, despite being far cheaper, far, many times cheaper than the W1ZM2, does in some ways make for a better tonal pairing, guys. Now, I know a lot of you will hear this and say, why would I spend money on this? This just proves that high-end audio devices are snake oil. But hear me out. So these sources have their own particular coloration. And I do like the Sony with all my other IEMs, and I would never say I pick this over the Sony for any other IEM, with the exception of Szalayi and a few others. There are also headphones I prefer this with. It's only in cases where the sonic presentation is warm, doesn't have or could use some lift in treble frequencies, and in cases where the bass is thick. In some of those cases, not all, I think this can sometimes be a better pairing because this is a bright neutral source. This is bright neutral to the point that a lot of bright IEMs will sound very fatiguing on this. So this is a very specific coloration. Fio sort of goes or broke with the treble, right? You either love the Fio treble with the right pairing or you hate the Fio treble. A lot of people who like Summit 5 stuff hate Fio. I don't want to use this word hate. Do not appreciate the Fio treble because it can sound metallic and very biting almost. However, with the Szalayi, this works because this also has the effect of, lessening the sort of bass impact. And I'm not someone who's afraid of bass, or I'm not someone who's perpetually trying to lessen the bass impact. But because this can be bassy, guys, with the BTR7, the bass just sounds a little more nimble, a little lighter, which works because the bass here otherwise is wonderful and thunderous. So it's a nice change of flavor. And I dare say it works really well, guys. The synergy issue, not always explainable, that A plus B will always equal C. These two guys rock. These two guys are a good match. These two guys pair really well. I just wanted to leave that with you because if you're want to use this on an out and about sort of situation, if you want to use this as a Szalayi in the gym or during walks like I do, because like I said, it does bass well and mid-range well, so you do get to be able to switch between vocal-based tracks and rock tracks. And rock tracks, once played well, do have the effect of prolonging my workouts because they're rhythm-based and they're fun and they can pump up my adrenaline and they just can elongate my workouts, which is why I love this combination, guys, because it's a wonderful combination. That said, when you move to the WM&ZM2, you do get a wider stage, more resolution, better separation, better timbre, etc., etc., etc. This does have very decent resolution on its own. I think at this sort of price range of $1,000, you are splitting hairs when you talk about resolution between IEMs that are 700, 600, or even 500. There will not be a whole lot of difference in resolution level between a Moondraw variations and this, which is perhaps why it's very difficult to penetrate the $1,000 price category. It is a category being dominated by the likes of the Sony IR-M9, which is a legend in the hobby. It is now being dominated by modern classic like the Symphonium Helios, which has fast become a legend, honestly. It's a bit bright, but that can be tamed with the stock silicone tips, which do make the presentation warmer. But I do think this holds its own in resolution, guys. It's not the kind of IEM where the resolution is shoved in your face because of the fact that this treble is very polite. However, if this had extended treble, you would feel the resolution more, if you know what I mean. Staging I talked about, it's wide, it's also deep. Imaging is wonderfully separated. Timbre is lovely. You do not get any plasticky metallic timbre from the planar magnetic driver in the mid-range. What's even more impressive is how well the planar, the BA, and the dynamic driver combine to give you the feel like it's one dynamic driver working or something. You just feel like it's one fast dynamic driver, guys. There's something going on with how well Oriolus has knit, or stitched rather, all these three drivers together to form one cohesive whole. And even in the complex of tracks, I don't feel like there's a different way in which these three drivers are firing. There is no dissonance, there is no lack of coordination between the drivers, insofar as one can hear this lack of coordination. And you even hear, or you might think, that is just one driver firing because the three drivers fire so beautifully together in unison. So it's very coherent timbrally. It's very lifelike timbrally. It has the lush, lovely mid-range timbre that Oriolus is famous for. Oriolus does mid-range like perhaps no other brand in the audio hobby, especially when it comes to IEMs. So that has to be said. This is no different. Wonderful timbre. And dynamics-wise, finally, guys, this has wonderful dynamics. I can't rave enough about the dynamics here. If anything, these tips and the BTR7 reign in the dynamics because it's punchy for days. It's hard-hitting. Guys, this IEM deserves your love. And if you like bass, this definitely deserves your love. If you like mid-range also, this also is something that I think a lot of mid-heads would appreciate. Treble heads might not apply, need not apply, because this is not what you get if you want a very trebly piece, like let's say Subtonic Storm, or let's say even the U12T has more treble. So this is flying a bit under the radar, like I said. And that's for no other reason, but sometimes that just happens until a lot of reviews come along. So I do hope this review will shed some light on this. This is the minimal sort of packaging it comes with. It's not very different from the packaging that the ISA came with, the Isabella, or Isabel. I'm not exactly sure how it's pronounced. So Oriolus Traillii is, of course, the flagship that I talked about in the beginning of this video. And you would do well to check out my video of the Traillii. I'll leave a link to the video of the Traillii in the description of this one. So this is what you get in terms of, accessories, a warranty card, this cable tie, and a bunch of silicone and foam tips, and a cleaner, a brush, a cleaning tool. So that's it, guys. I hope this review was useful. Do give this a listen if you get a chance. I do think that if you like bass, if you like mid-range, this will win your hearts. That's it for me, guys. I hope this was useful. Like my video if you like it, and follow my work if you've not already, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye-bye.